Hi, I want to welcome you to PF 494, our class on global direct democracy when voters make laws. My name is Joe Matthews. I'm your professor, um, and I want to tell you a little bit of the story of why this class exists. It's a brand new class, which I hope um, this is the first but not the last time that this will be offered, not just in ASU, but hopefully ultimately to people around the world. It's a very strange thing that I'm teaching this class and speaking to you here over the internet. I hope you'll bear with me since this is new and I think this class is an experiment, but it's a very useful, urgent, necessary experiment. It's also well, it's also very new and strange to me. It's also very natural. It's really part of a story that's partly my story, partly the story of direct democracy globally, an ongoing story. And I'm very glad to have you in this class because I think each of you can be part of this story if you choose to be, and really part of a field of study and a direction of a field of study that's very important in the world but hasn't gotten the attention from the academic world that it should. I'm not an academic. I'm a professor of practice at ASU in the College of Public Programs. Became one in August. But I'm really a journalist. I don't live in Arizona. I live in Los Angeles, where I'm speaking to you from. Um, and I came to this in a very, very roundabout way. I was a newspaper reporter for many years at the Baltimore Sun, the Wall Street Journal, the Los Angeles Times most recently. When I joined the Times in the year 2000, one of the many things I did was write about ballot initiative campaigns. Um, Ultimately, the recall of Governor Gray Davis and the election of Arnold Schwarzenegger as governor in 2003. Um, and and I followed that story very closely. It was my story. I covered Schwarzenegger day to day, and how he attempted to govern. And the way he attempted to govern is the way so many people in California have to attempt to govern, whether they're governors or even legislators. Is it's not enough to use the normal representative government process. They began to use direct democracy, usually ballot initiatives, to govern, and interest groups that wanted things from government used the initiative process. And more, the initiative process became sort of the main stage of governance in California. I covered that story. I wrote a book about Governor Schwarzenegger as a sort of political biography that went through his life and dwelled on his election in his first term as governor, that was published by Public Affairs in New York in 2006. And I continued to follow the story at the Times, and then I left newspaper journalism in 2008, um, and followed the story as a fellow at a think tank, a centrist think tank, based in Washington, with a small California operation beginning in 2008 called the New America Foundation. Um, Now, throughout this process, I wrote about initiative campaigns, looked deeper and deeper at how governance worked in California. And one very basic thing that um, reporters do if they're doing their jobs is to just sort of compare, step away from the news sometimes and look at, this initiative process is a big thing in California. A lot of people think it doesn't work for various reasons. Well, how does it compare to the initiative process in other places? And I found some work on that in a purely American context. You could go and look at how other states, places like Arizona, Oregon, Colorado, Nevada, that had particularly been heavy practitioners of the initiative, like California and referendum. There were studies of that. There was academic work. There was journalistic books. There wasn't a lot about a lot of the other states where the initiative is used very often, but we don't hear about it quite as much. Places like Ohio and Michigan and Missouri. Um, but it found very little about initiative and referendum around the world. It was hard to get to. I spent a lot of time calling people and trying to understand better, sort of where California's initiative process fit in a broader context. Even the stuff on America wasn't that great and wasn't very comparative and didn't really answer very simple questions about, what were the rules of the game, how is the process used, um, and what efforts were there to make it better, to improve it, to manage it, to reform it. Very basic questions. And as I went around the world, I ended up meeting a person you'll meet in the course of this class as a guest lecturer. I think one of the strengths of this class is going to be we'll hear from guest lecturers from literally all over the country and all over the world on direct democracy. And each session, each week, each module, on different online education terms in use here in ASU. I've heard them all, but each one is sort of built around a guest lecture. I hope it will be. Some of the guest lectures have been done, have been taped and recorded for you. I'm in the process of some of that. But the fellow you'll meet, a very important person, is Bruno Kaufmann, who's an extraordinary guy. Is born in Switzerland, which is, as you'll learn, is really in some place the birthplace of modern direct democracy. Though the Greeks sometimes make an argument. Who had grown up there, been involved in an initiative campaign when he was very young, that was very important to his life, become a journalist for Swiss publications, Swiss radio and television, ended up marrying a Swedish woman, moving to Sweden, being involved in direct democracy there, and ultimately had spent time in his life both as a journalist, as a political scientist, as an election official, dealing with direct democracy. And he, in addition to his work, he spent considerable time, about half his time, traveling around the world, trying to document all the places direct democracy existed, looking at what the rules of the game were, and also what the reality of practice was. I hadn't found anyone who'd done this. He turned out to be a very sympathetic person. I actually met him in Governor Schwarzenegger's office, of all places, and he became a very important person to me, and because he had contacts and ways to connect to the story of direct democracy all over the world to get a global picture, because no one really had a global picture, and the best global picture that existed was essentially inside his brain. And so in 2008, after some conversations, he decided that he'd met all these people around the world, but the world needed a global picture. It needed databases and data collection. It needed a community of people who worked in direct democracy, who wrote about it and studied it. And so he essentially called a meeting in a little town in Switzerland, Aarau, Switzerland, which had a long history of direct democracy, even before the 19th century advent of modern direct democracy, and a sort of history of or primitive modes of direct democracy that that were almost 1,000 years old. He invited his people to get to Switzerland if they could pay their own way, and I did. And there were several hundred people showed up, people from all over the world. And it was the beginning of a process, a process called the Global Forum process, Global Forum on Modern Direct Democracy. It's a process that continues to this day. I became Bruno's co-president and partner in doing this work. It's a very informal network, no legal standing, no NGO, no formal nonprofit, but essentially a network of people who connected on the web and then in person. We met the following year in Seoul, South Korea. And then in 2010, we I ran a major conference in San Francisco, again, pulling people from all over the world and pulling in the public in a great way for 5 days, a couple days that focused on the US, and then a couple days that focused on the world. And we looked at direct democracy and began real efforts to bring together different people who had different data in parts of the world into a joint sort of data project, which you'll use in this class, called the Navigator, the Direct Democracy Navigator, to make comparison possible. We came from this from a journalistic way. We wanted to know this story. Direct democracy is growing, as I learned, all over the world. Its use and importance was, to governance was critical not only in my state, but states of the American West and in many countries around the world. And it was on the books in even more places. It was part of the law, the constitutional structure, even if it wasn't much used in most of the countries of the world. I wanted to know the story from an academic perspective, and Bruno is a political scientist, and I'm now this professor of practice at ASU. There was a sense that we wanted to have the ability to think critically about this process. Now, there's been academic work on direct democracy that goes back 100 years. There's been journalistic work. But much of the work is sort of comes from a point of Is this good or is this bad? Is direct democracy something that we thought of as good or something that's dangerous to democracy itself, to representative government? There hadn't been real critical thought and much work about the design of direct democracy. What was proper design? When did direct democracy work well? When did it integrate well with representative democracy? And when it was dangerous? Um, and it was just precious little on that. And that to me was actually a much more important question, whether it was good or bad. I mean, as a Californian, and I think for those of you who are Arizonans, this is true. Direct democracy is with us as part of how we govern, and that's true in most of the democratic world now. The question is, what is the best design? How can we improve it? How can we use it? Those questions weren't being asked. They weren't being scrutinized, and those are the big questions of this course. We're going to try to get a picture of how this works, look at all the pieces of direct democracy, the different ways it's practiced, the structure of it, and then you as and students and scholars are going to try to look at ways to improve it. Your two papers in this class sort of line up that way. Those were big, important questions for me. They were questions of this process. We had a great success in San Francisco, launched the Navigator, which is still growing. You'll meet Klaus Hoffmann from Europe, I hope, who runs the Navigator and has just spent some time in Latin America developing data and rules from those countries. The Navigator is still very primitive. I'm hoping that that people in this course may end up being folks who contribute to the building of the knowledge and the data that's collected there, and then even in a few other places. We followed up this global forum process with a global forum that took a week in Montevideo, Uruguay. Uruguay uses initiative referendum, and actually the main text of this course, Direct Democracy Worldwide, is written by Uruguayan David Altman, who now lives and teaches at the Catholic University in Chile, in Santiago de Chile. But you'll hear from David in the second week, and I think this is a terrific conversation, a guest talk. You'll see in these talks I often ask questions, I sort of interview the speaker, but I think that's one not to be missed. And his book, while it's more than a little academic, we're looking at a few chapters in it. First two chapters is your initial reading for this week. I think you'll find David's way of sort of breaking things down may seem a little dense at first, but really look at what he's saying, look at some of the graphs in it as a way of sort of understanding and creating a catalog and categories for the different kinds of mechanisms of direct democracy. So that process continues. We're still trying to really build, both data and a discipline of study of global direct democracy. And this course is a big step forward. There's no course like this offered anywhere in the world. My hope is this course will, and this is the first time it's being offered within the ASU world, that in the future it will be offered globally. And I'm really eager in every stage of this course for your constructive criticism and feedback about what works and what doesn't work, so you get a good experience and so that future students get a good experience. Again, I am new at this. I have taught before at a college level, but not this subject exactly, and not in this frame. We're hoping that this is a course really that has the role of bringing together a lot of knowledge. It's never been put together in one place at one point, and through guest speakers from all over the world, you'll hear from this diverse array of people around the world. This course is in some ways a way to assemble a lot of knowledge and to push forward questions. And so I really I welcome you to this process. How did this end up at ASU? I am one of the editors of a nonprofit publication, an event organization publication we publish daily called Zocalo Public Square. Zocalo, Zocalo, sort of Mexican for public square. So our name is Public Square, Public Square. We're based in LA. We actually have a small office just across the way at the Cronkite School. ASU is one of our sponsors and sponsors our work, and we have an important partnership with ASU. And as one of the editors, we put on events in Arizona, we publish in Arizona, and we also are part of the community. That one of the things that we've done is I've take time away from Zocalo to come here and to teach this class and try to offer something back to ASU for the support that it gives Zocalo. So you may occasionally hear from me about Zocalo, and I will occasionally, throughout the fall, while I, of course, I live and work in Los Angeles, I'm occasionally in Phoenix, and I will be in Phoenix this very first week on Friday from 3 to 6 at the school. I'm still waiting for um, a room where I can meet with you. I'll lecture a little bit, and you should feel free to come in and meet me and ask questions and raise questions. So, of course, about direct democracy, so we should have a spirit of direct democracy between teacher and instructor. But that'll be this Friday, January 11th. I also intend to be in Phoenix every couple weeks. The dates that I know where I'll be there and available to office hours, I'll open it up January 23rd, which I believe is a Wednesday. February 11th, which I believe is a Monday, but double check. Definitely February 11th is the date, and probably March 8th as well are all dates that I intend to be in Phoenix, and there I'm sure will be others as we go through the course. My email, so please contact me, is Joe Joe at JoeMathews.com. That's Joe at JoeMathews.com. There's just one T in Matthews that can throw people off. I do have two ASU email addresses that forward to that as well. A JMMATHE1, the numeral 1, at asu.edu, and Joseph.m.Matthews, again, just one T in Matthews, at asu.edu. Those reach me as well, but they forward to that Joe at JoeMathews.com email address, so that's probably the best way to get me. Again, I really welcome you to this course. I hope that you'll learn something. You're certainly getting a course that no one has ever gotten before. I hope you'll be part of. We'll have discussions every week. We'll have some journaling on readings. Tried to limit readings to not sort of much more than 2 chapters of a book, but aiming for 40 pages a week. I've been told by the ASU administration that you're supposed to be spending about 9 hours a week on this class. I hope it's not any more than that, and that sometime the papers are fairly involved, so may save up some of that time for those 2 papers. But again, I welcome your feedback. I welcome you to class. I welcome you to this story of sort of building a discipline of global direct democracy, where people from all over the world, by comparing notes, by assembling data, can see what works and what doesn't in initiative and referendum and other forms of direct democracy. And I'll stop and define those terms briefly. A ballot initiative is a type of measure in which people, usually by regular citizens, usually by gathering signatures, though there can be other methods, can put a law or constitutional amendment on a ballot. There are other kinds of initiatives, agenda-setting initiatives, where there's a proposal of a law or constitutional amendment, but it doesn't necessarily go to a ballot. We'll talk about that. A referendum, in the language typology, of course, is a moment where citizens get to vote on a law or action of a legislative body. It's been done by the legislature, though, unlike an initiative where the law or constitutional amendment is proposed, drafted by citizens. In this case, you're voting on the product of a legislative process, either because in one type of referendum, the citizens have collected signatures or done some popular action that requires them to get to vote on whatever the legislative body has done. In other areas, there are obligatory referendums. Often when you change constitutions in the democratic world, the constitutional amendment requires some sign-off by the people. That's true in most American states. So constitutional amendments go to the public even if they come out of the legislative body. And sometimes the legislative body takes the option, when it doesn't have to, of asking their people for their opinion on a particular law or other action. There's the referendum. There is the recall, which we'll get into a little bit. It's not a big focus of the course, but it's an important direct democratic tool in which there is a vote by the people on whether to remove someone from office during the period of the office, not at a regularly scheduled election. Those are 3 terms that we should define and know well going in. so much of these terms are unstandardized. You'll see a couple different typologies, both from David Altman, the author of our textbook, and from Roberto Kaufman, slightly different typologies, but trying to get a common set of terms to define direct democracy is part of this effort to be able to compare and to work globally. So with that, let me not take any more of your time. Let me stop here. Thank you. And again, joe@joematthews.com. I look forward to hearing from you if you have questions, concerns, and suggestions. For those who can be there 3 to 6 on Friday, I'll be posting in the course announcements the exact room location once I get a room. I'm taping this on Saturday, January 5th. And I hope to see some of you on Friday and see all of you online as we move forward with this course. Good to meet you and here, and hope to meet you soon in person and more directly online.